This is an animated map of events for the West Memphis Murders, looking at Jessie Misskelley's confession as covered in episode 523 to 525. On the 5th of May 1993, 3 8-year-old boys went missing from their home in West Memphis. They were Michael Moore, Stevie Branch and Chris Byers. Their bodies were found the next day, naked, bound and submerged in a muddy creek in a small patch of woods called the Robin Hood Hills. A month after the discovery, the West Memphis police got a taped confession from Jessie Misskelley Jr. These are the events leading up to that confession. On the day after the murders, Vicki Hutcheson was at Marion Police Department on credit card charges. Her son Aaron knew the murdered boys well as they used to live nearby on East Barton. Over the next few weeks, she worked with Marion officer Don Bray and the West Memphis police to befriend Damien Eccles in an attempt to secretly record him talking about his involvement with a cult and possibly the murders. In order to do this, she asked her close friend, Jessie Misskelley, who also lived at Highlands, to introduce her to Damien. On the 15th of May, Jessie and two of his friends, David Sims and Dennis Carter, called police to report 3 young boys running away from a suspicious man on the railway tracks behind Goodyear on Missouri. The man identified himself as Tracy Laxton from Mississippi and asked the boys to hang out and have a beer with him, but they were scared because of the recent murders and ran to Howard's Donuts to use the phone before walking to the bowling alley to meet police. On the 28th of May, Vicki reported that she had met Damien back on the 19th and he had driven her and Jessie to an SBAT 20 minutes away in Turrell. She later admitted this was a lie, but because of her reports of Damien's involvement in cult activity and Jessie's association with him, they brought him in for questioning. On the 3rd of June, Mike Allen was assigned to bring Jessie Misskelley Jr. in for general questioning. He arrived at 9:45 a.m. and by 4:30 p.m. had confessed on tape to witnessing the murders by Damien and Jason, as well as implicating himself in the apprehension of Michael Moore. There are some time discrepancies, especially in Ridge's report. However, according to the time log, the day looked like this. 9:45, Jessie arrived at the police station with Detective Mike Allen. 10 a.m, the subject description form was completed and Ridge joined the pre-polygraph interview. 11:15, Mike Allen and Jessie left the police station to find his father to give parental consent for the polygraph test. 11:30 a.m, Bill Durham conducted a 1-hour polygraph test where he said Jessie showed signs of deception. 12:40 p.m, Ridge and Gitchell interview him post-polygraph. 2:20 p.m, Jessie admitted to Gitchell that he was present at the time of the murders. 2:44 p.m, the first recorded interview was carried out, ending at 3:18. 3:45, the second recorded interview started. It doesn't say when it finished. By 10:30 p.m, Damien and Jason had both been arrested by the West Memphis Police Department. They were held in custody from that day on until their conviction in 1994. Detective Sergeant Mike Allen went to the Misskelley residence. Lee Rush answered the door and said neither Jessie Jr. or Sr. were in. Allen then went to Jessie Misskelley Sr.'s place of work, Jim McNeese Repair Shop, and asked if he could talk to Jessie Jr. about 2 of his friends at Lakeshore. Jessie Sr. went to pick Jessie Jr. up from Vicki Hutcheson's house where he'd spent the night. Jessie Jr. then went to West Memphis Police Department with Mike Allen at approximately 9:45. The subject description was completed at 10 a.m, then Ridge joined Allen for the interview afterwards. Both took notes. Neither of them contain any information on a cult or the murders. The notes do say that he worked with Josh Darby and Ricky Deese on the 5th of May, getting home about 5 p.m. He'd known Damien for about a year and sees him at the skate rink often, but thinks he's sick in the head. He introduced him to Vicki 3 weeks ago, but hadn't seen him recently. He didn't know anything about satanic activity and hadn't been to Robin Hood Hills before, but had heard rumours that Damien and Robert Birch had committed the murders. Based on this, Ridge and Allen arranged for him to take a polygraph. Ridge asked Jessie to take a polygraph to determine the truthfulness of his statement. Jessie agreed, but they also needed parental consent, so Detective Allen got back in the car with Jessie and went looking for his father. As they were going up Missouri by McDonald's, they saw him driving south and flagged him down. He signed the form and they went back to the police department to start the polygraph. Bill Durham carried out the polygraph exam where Jessie denied any involvement in satanic rituals or the murders. There were 10 questions in total, but the report only shows the 5 that, according to Durham, Jessie showed significant responses indicative of deception. The report Durham gave to officers was Jessie was lying his arse off, so Gitchell and Ridge decided to interview him further. It should be noted here that Warren Holmes, expert for the defence, who worked on cases such as JFK, Martin Luther King and Watergate, found no signs of deception in his analysis. As testified to by both Ridge and Gitchell, the post-polygraph interview got underway at 12:40 when they got back from lunch. It ran for 1 hour 40 minutes and contained 3 core interrogation techniques. First, the circle showing law enforcement on the outside and the guilty on the inside. A photo of a deceased Chris Byers, and finally the Aaron Hutcheson tape saying no one knows what happened but me. During this interview, Ridge took notes which focus on 3 phone calls Jessie said he received from Jason Baldwin regarding the murders and his knowledge of satanic activity. He said Jason called him the night before the murders. Damien was in the background and they said they were planning something. They were going to get some boys and hurt them and wanted him to go with them. He began to say he didn't want anything to do with it and then said he'd seen a picture of the boys killed during a meeting. He then goes on to talk about going to meetings, building a fire, there being a briefcase of drugs, killing dogs and eating part of it. There were more notes on the photo of the 3 boys and how Damien has been watching them in the woods where they were killed. He said Damien goes to the skate rink to find boys. The meetings are held on Wednesdays. 8 or 9 people attend and have an orgy afterwards. He said they have had meetings in Robin Hood Hills. Jason carries a folding knife, but Damien doesn't have one. There were 3 calls, but he isn't sure of the times. The day before the murders, the morning of, and after dark, saying they did it. At this point, Gitchell gave Jessie a picture of Chris in the coroner's office. Jessie looked at it hard, but misidentified him as the Moore boy. The last and most important note of this interview so far is after the tape of Aaron was played. Ridge left the room and Jessie told Gitchell he was present at the time of the murders and did witness Damien and Jason do it. According to Ridge's testimony, about 2:20 p.m. Jessie told Inspector Gitchell that he was present at the time of the murders and began crying about what had happened. At this time, myself and Inspector Gitchell gave Jessie some time to compose himself and for me to compose myself due to the emotional situation that had just began. We then prepared for the interrogation to be taped due to this being the first indication that Jessie had actually taken part in the murders and was present in the woods at the time. According to the police and their own records, there's a 24-minute window from when Jessie disclosed he witnessed the murders and the first recorded interview where he goes on to implicate himself in the crime. So why was he arrested on capital murder charges before the tape confession even happened? At this point, there's absolutely no police notes or specific details that relate to the events of the murders, just an admission that he was there. So we'd fully expect all of the details of the crime to come from Jessie during the first confession. But do they? The first recorded interview is 34 minutes. It's not a free-flowing narrative, so as well as looking for details that conflict or corroborate facts of the crime, we're looking to see who introduces this information into the narrative first. It starts with the second phone call made by Jason, the one on the morning of the 5th of May. The problem is Jason was at school at 9 a.m. He says they walked and correctly identifies the location of Robin Hood behind Blue Beacon. He says he saw Damien hit one boy and then start screwing him, but there's no signs of sodomy in the autopsy reports. When shown a photo and asked which boy Damien hit, he misidentifies Chris Byers as Michael Moore again. Ridge is the first to say that Damien hit Chris in the head. The detail doesn't come from Jessie. Jessie then implicates himself by saying Michael took off and he chased him and held him until they got there. Ridge provides multiple location options from the creek, woods, big bayou, field and path. Jessie said he was in the woods when Damien first hit Chris and then out by the service road when they got the boys back together. Although he then goes on to say that Michael ran towards the houses and pipe, which is the opposite direction to the road. It's unclear if he's just confused about the geography or the question or all of the above. Ridge is the one that asks if all 3 boys were tied up. Jessie hasn't mentioned any bindings at this stage. Ridge then asks if they were clothed when tied up. Jessie does make a distinction here as to when they were clothed and naked, but does go on to say it was just their hands that were tied and that they were sodomized again, both of which are incorrect. In the pre-interview, Jessie said Jason always carried a folding knife. Ridge's question brings that knife into play at this point of the story. Jessie says he saw him cut one boy's face. Ridge then says another boy was cut. When Jessie said he was cut at the bottom, Ridge starts to say was he face down, and Jessie agrees, before Gitchell jumps in saying, "You mean here, the groin?" And again Jessie agrees. Despite Jessie being 17, Ridge then asks if he knows what a penis is, and then this is where Jessie says he sees them cutting. When describing where this happened, all the detail comes from Ridge, with Jessie just answering multiple choice questions. The timeline is an issue and Gitchell tries to move it back, but Jessie's answers conflict the facts. Ridge asks about consciousness. Jessie says they were unconscious when tied and then sodomized again, which conflicts with the autopsy. Ridge asks how they were tied to stop them running off, but Jessie doesn't confirm this key detail. Gitchell asks if a stick was used to hit the boys. Again, this was not something that Jessie previously volunteered. The 6-inch fold-up knife described doesn't match the knife found in the lake and used at trial. Ridge asks if he returned to the scene, and Jessie said he did a few days after the murders. Jessie said he saw Chris being choked to death with a stick, but Ridge, knowing this isn't aligned to the autopsy, turns this to say he was unconscious and he just thought he was dead. Ridge says Jessie said earlier he got sick, but again this isn't referenced in any pre-interview notes. This interview ended at 3:18 and the police started obtaining search and arrest warrants before Gitchell conducted a second interview to clear up some discrepancies regarding time and events. Unlike the others, this interview is not time-stamped and the police log itself says the documented time of 3:45 is incorrect. A big issue is the timeline. Michael, Stevie and Chris were in school and there were plenty of sightings of them in the neighbourhood up to around 6 p.m, so noon doesn't fit the timeline. Gitchell asked Jessie the time again and now he says 5 or 6 p.m. Gitchell then says he told him earlier he had said 7 or 8 and again Jessie goes with this time. There are no notes to support that he said 7 or 8 earlier. When asked what they were tied up with, Jessie says brown rope. How and what the boys are tied up with is a critical detail, but Jessie got both of these very wrong. To summarise, this is what the police mentioned before Jessie did, as well as the evidence Jessie got right and wrong. Despite the leading questions, the total lack of specific details, and all the incorrect information provided, this was enough for the West Memphis Police Department to hold Jessie and arrest Jason and Damien on capital murder charges. They were arrested on the 3rd of June 1993, convicted in 94, and incarcerated until their release on an Alpha plea in 2011.